Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 12, where we continue discussing Asian Americans and their representations in the media. And the readings for this week are an essay from the textbook, essay number 9, and the reading that is posted on Canvas, chapter 5 from Ono and Pham. So the readings for this week really focus on the idea of the model minority and how this image has been attached to Asian Americans and sort of the problems with that image and the impact that image has on Asian American communities. So the image of the model minority focuses on Asian groups that have been successful in the United States. It's characterized as being innately smarter in certain academic fields. They're characterized as being quiet, hardworking, and staying out of trouble, and that they take responsibility for themselves and don't blame others or the government for their social status. Now, the reading pointed out what some of the problems are with this idea of model minority, which sometimes is perceived as a positive stereotype or as a positive image. And the reading really demonstrates how it's not a positive experience for Asian Americans. So the idea of a model minority dismisses and silences Asian American groups that do not fit into this idea. For example, issues of poverty among Asian American populations are ignored. So you have to think about how large and diverse the Asian American population is. That includes people from a whole host of different countries, different cultures, languages, and so on. And so that not all Asian American groups have had the same experience in the United States. But because of the successes of some of them, those successes have become generalized to the entire population. And this has an effect of then silencing or dismissing the fact that there are quite a number of Asian American groups that have not had those same kinds of successes. Another problem with this idea is that how difficult it is for Asian Americans who don't care for STEM fields, right? If they want to be in the humanities or arts or something completely different than STEM, this becomes difficult for them to be able to enter those fields because of this assumption that they all go into STEM fields. There are pressures to be academically successful, and these impact many young Asian Americans' mental health. And there's quite a number of studies on the stresses that Asian American students endure because of this expectation that they're all academically successful. The idea that Asian Americans are overrepresented in certain fields masks the ways they are underrepresented in other fields like the arts or CEOs of businesses and so on. Another problem is that this idea that Asian Americans are all successful pins this group against other racial groups, like African Americans and Latinxes, where these two groups are compared to Asian American success and are questioned as to why they can't be as successful as Asian Americans, which makes it difficult then for solidarity to exist among these groups. And the clip there will take you to a video that talks more about what some of these problems are with the model minority image. The reading also talked about the model minority as yellow peril, which was one of the key images we talked about last time, where Asian Americans have become so successful that they now pose a threat to the nation. And the reading talked about how this creates a racial ambivalence towards the Asian Americans, where on the one hand, they are admired for their success, but at the same time are feared because their success is not perceived as going too far and becoming a threat. Asian Americans are perceived now as taking over different educational spaces, like higher education spaces, as the reading talked about the University of California and how it was depicted in a newspaper article in a negative way because of their large Asian American population. The reading also talked about sort of the sense of them taking over in certain schools, middle schools, high schools, and so on. And how some white parents have responded to this larger population of Asian Americans in some of their schools, where they're taking their children out of those schools because of the negative competitive culture that they assume is created as a result of the Asian American student population. They also perceive a large number of Asian American students in their schools as disadvantaging their white students in terms of competition for becoming valedictorian of the school or for being accepted into colleges and universities from their school. The reading talked about the model minority image and how it appears in Hollywood, where Asian American representations are limited to specific roles such as doctor or scientist, and provided a number of examples from television, films, and so on, how they're represented as unfeeling and robotic, and only care about their individual success at the expense of others. And also they're often depicted as extremely competitive. So this also fits with the yellow peril idea because it now portrays Asian Americans as taking over yet another type of job or profession, in this case, the medical profession. Finally, the reading also talked about and raised this question about whether Asian Americans are becoming white. On the one hand, they're perceived sometimes as becoming white or being close to whiteness because they've attained levels of education, occupation, and income that at times surpasses white populations. So they're not perceived as disadvantaged as some other minority groups are perceived. And also because they live in white neighborhoods and intermarry with whites. But the reading also points out that regardless of these particular characteristics, they still remain culturally distinct and suspect in society and are always perceived as foreign. And you can see that in the numerous examples given in the readings of the ways in which they're perceived as a threat, whether it's in schools or that they're taking over medical professions or what have you. So as long as those kinds of images continue to persist about Asian Americans, then they're not really going to ever be accepted as white, even if they wanted to, right? Because the white population or the dominant population in the United States continues to perceive them as other, or as not quite like them. Okay, so this ends the lecture for this week. Have a good week, and I'll see you guys next time.